The conference hall smelled like recycled air and diplomatic failure, which was exactly how Ambassador Thex'nor preferred it. 17 cycles of peace negotiations between the Caldarian Empire and the Vrynn Collective had produced nothing but carefully worded insults and passive-aggressive beverage choices. The humans, those pink-fleshed newcomers to the Galactic stage, sat quietly in the corner observer section, taking notes on their primitive data tablets like eager students at a lecture they barely understood. Thex'nor's third eye focused on the human delegation. 3 of them. A weathered female with silver hair who called herself Ambassador Martinez, a younger male in what humans called a suit, and a third figure who had not moved for 4 hours straight. This third human wore a different uniform, something called a dress blue with colorful rectangles pinned to the chest that apparently meant something to other humans. The Vrynn Collective maintains that the orbital bombardment of Kellis station was a legitimate military target, hissed Speaker Vorthak, his scales rippling with barely contained rage. Your empire's protest is noted and summarily rejected. Thex'nor allowed himself a subtle gesture of contempt, one antenna tilting precisely 7 degrees counterclockwise. Legitimate? There were 40,000 civilians processing agricultural shipments. But please continue demonstrating why your species should be glassed from existence. The human in the corner, the one with the rectangles, made a sound. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cough. More like someone had just told a joke at a funeral and was trying not to enjoy it. Ambassador Martinez shot the uniformed human a look that could freeze helium. Gunnery Sergeant Cole, do you have something to contribute? The human, this Cole person, stood up slowly. Very slowly. The kind of slow that made Thex'nor's danger sensors start humming. Cole was not particularly large by human standards, perhaps average, but something about the way this human moved reminded Thex'nor of a pack hunter deciding whether prey was worth the calories. No ma'am, Cole said, voice flat. Just remembering something funny. Would you care to share with the delegation? Vorthak said, his translator giving the words a mocking edge. Perhaps human humor can succeed where human diplomacy has failed. Cole looked at Ambassador Martinez, who closed her eyes and nodded once. The gesture of someone who knows they are about to regret a decision but is making it anyway. Sure, Cole said, walking toward the center of the circular negotiation platform. You said 40,000 civilians at an agricultural processing station, right? Correct, Thex'nor confirmed. Though the Vrynn dispute they were civilians. Right. Because they might have been loading grain that could have fed soldiers makes them combatants. Classic argument. Cole's tone was conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made Thex'nor's scales itch. So that got me thinking about Earth history. We had a similar situation once. Well, several times. Okay, lots of times. But there is this one instance I remember from my history classes. Cole stopped in front of the holographic display showing Kellis station before its destruction. Beautiful, spinning gently in orbit, solar panels catching the light of Kellis Prime. Then the display shifted to after, debris and bodies and frozen atmosphere crystallizing in the void. We had these things called the Geneva Conventions, Cole continued. Rules about war, how to fight, what you can and cannot do, that sort of thing. Took us a while to agree on them, and even longer to sometimes follow them, but we got there eventually. One of the big rules was about civilians. You do not target civilians. Period. Does not matter if they are making boots for soldiers or growing food or building trucks. They are non-combatants. Off limits. Vorthak's head frills expanded in what Thex'nor recognized as aggressive posturing. War is war, human. Resources are legitimate targets. Your species' primitive squeamishness about efficient military doctrine is irrelevant. Though I am not squeamish, Cole said, and now his smile was visible, not a happy smile. The kind of smile a predator makes before it stops playing with its food. I am just explaining the rules we made to stop ourselves from doing the things we're really good at. The conference hall became very quiet. Even the environmental systems seemed to lower their hum. You see, Cole walked in a slow circle around the holographic display. Humans spent roughly 12,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. We got creative with it. Swords, spears, arrows, guns, bombs, fire, poison gas, nuclear weapons, biological agents, orbital kinetic strikes. We tried everything. And somewhere along the way some of us realized we needed rules. Because without rules we stopped being soldiers and became something else entirely. Thex'nor felt his second heart rate increase. This human's tone had not changed. Still conversational, almost casual, but the content was making his prey instincts scream. The Geneva Conventions prohibited certain weapons and tactics, Cole continued. No poison gas because we used that in World War I and it was so horrific that even we decided never again. No biological weapons because plague is indiscriminate and kills everyone, combatant and civilian alike. No torture of prisoners because once you start down that road, the enemy does it too, and suddenly everyone is competing to see who can be most creative with suffering. No targeting civilians because if everyone does that, war stops being a contest between militaries and becomes a race to commit genocide first. Your point, Gunnery Sergeant? Ambassador Martinez asked quietly. My point, ma'am, is that these rules were not made because we're nice. They were made because we're not. The Geneva Conventions exist because humans are so spectacularly good at violence that we had to make a rule book to prevent ourselves from turning every conflict into an extinction-level event. We made rules against things specifically because we had already done them and discovered they worked too well. Vorthak laughed, a hissing, rattling sound. You expect us to believe that you're soft species? You who have been in space for barely a century, you are warriors to be feared. You have never even fought a proper war. Never fought? Cole's expression did not change. Ambassador Martinez, may I access the historical database? Martinez sighed. Keep it relevant, Gunny. Cole pulled up his data tablet and connected it to the conference display. Images began to appear. Cities reduced to rubble. Landscapes scorched and poisoned. Bodies. So many bodies. Human bodies in uniforms and civilian clothing alike. This is Dresden, Cole said, pointing to a city that was just fire and smoke in the image. Firebombing. 25,000 dead in one night. This is Hiroshima. Atomic weapon. 70,000 dead instantly, another 70,000 from radiation and burns. This is the Somme. 1 million casualties in 4 months over a few miles of mud and barbed wire. This is Nanking. 300,000 civilians murdered in 6 weeks. This is Stalingrad. 2 million casualties, military and civilian combined, fighting building by building, room by room for one city that both sides decided was worth bleeding for. The images kept coming, a cascade of human-inflicted horror. This is just from one century, Cole said. The 20th. We called it the bloodiest century in human history, and we have 6,000 years of recorded history to compare it to. In that 100-year period, we killed approximately 108 million of our own species in wars, genocides and politically motivated famines. We invented industrial-scale murder. We built factories specifically designed to kill people efficiently. We created weapons that could end all life on our planet several times over. And we built enough of them that we could still end the world even after most of them failed to launch. Thex'nor found himself unable to look away from the images. The sheer scale of destruction, and all of it self-inflicted, human against human. And the worst part? Cole's voice dropped lower. We won. Humanity survived. We looked at the ashes of our worst century, counted our dead and decided to keep going. We did not go extinct, we did not collapse. We picked ourselves up, made some rules to try not to do it again quite so badly, and we reached for the stars. Every human alive today is descended from survivors of that century. We carry that history in our genes, in our culture, in our military doctrine. This is meant to frighten us? Vorthak said, but his frills had flattened against his skull. You admit your species is barbaric and self-destructive? No, Cole said. I am explaining why we have rules. The Geneva Conventions, the Hague Conventions, the various treaties and agreements we made, they are not signs of weakness. They are warning labels. They are a list of things we're not allowed to do anymore because we're too dangerous when we do them. Every rule in that book exists because some human somewhere did that thing, and it worked terrifyingly well. Cole closed the images and stood at parade rest, hands behind his back, feet shoulder-width apart. So when you say that bombing agricultural stations full of civilians is legitimate military strategy, when you argue that resources are valid targets regardless of who operates them, when you suggest that the rules of civilized warfare are primitive squeamishness, what you are actually saying is that you want to fight without rules, you want total war, you want the kind of conflict where everything and everyone is a legitimate target. The temperature in the conference hall seemed to drop. And I am here to tell you as politely as I can that you really do not want to see what humans do in a war without rules. Because we wrote those rules specifically to protect you from us, not the other way around. The silence that followed Cole's statement lasted exactly 12 seconds. Thex'nor counted them, one mandible twitch at a time, while his brain processed the implications of what this human had just said. Around the circular conference table, representatives from 6 different species sat frozen, translators humming softly as they tried to find equivalent concepts in languages that had never needed words for industrial genocide. Vorthak recovered first, his frills snapping upright in a display of aggression that would have sent most prey species scrambling. Threats? You dare threaten the Vrynn Collective in a neutral diplomatic forum? This is a violation of the Concordat protocols, not a threat, Cole said calmly. A clarification. See, that is the thing about humans. We do not threaten. We warn. There is a difference. A threat is when you promise to do something bad if someone does not comply. A warning is when you explain the natural consequences of a particular course of action. Ambassador Martinez stood up, her face carefully neutral, but Thex'nor caught the subtle tension in her shoulders. She was worried. But not about the alien delegations. She was worried about what her own Marine might say next. Gunnery Sergeant, I think you have made your point, she said. Almost finished, ma'am, Cole replied. He turned back to the assembled delegates, specifically focusing on Vorthak. You want to know why humans have not fought a proper war since joining the Galactic community? It is not because we cannot. It is because you have not given us a reason to. Every conflict we have observed, every territorial dispute, every trade disagreement, every border skirmish between your various empires and collectives and federations, they have all been conducted with a certain level of restraint, rules of engagement, proportional response, designated military targets, honor codes, all that good stuff. Cole gestured at the now blank holographic display. We saw that, and we thought, oh good, civilized species. They fight wars the way we tried to fight them after we learned our lessons. So we stayed in our corner, kept our mouths shut, and took notes. We figured you had already been through your own dark periods and come out the other side. We assumed you understood why certain lines should not be crossed. But this, Cole pointed at the image of destroyed Kellis station that Thex'nor had displayed earlier. This suggests maybe you have not learned those lessons yet. Maybe you have never had to. Maybe your species got to space before you got really creative with the murder, and now you think this is what war looks like. Limited. Contained. Manageable. Delegate Kreshva of the Pelion Assembly, a usually silent observer, spoke up. Her voice was melodic, translated into harmonic tones that the universal systems rendered as almost musical. Are you suggesting, Gunnery Sergeant Cole, that humanity would intervene in conflicts between established galactic powers? Your species has no military presence outside your own solar system. You have 12 ships capable of faster-than-light travel, and 3 of those are cargo vessels. You possess no orbital superiority platforms, no fleet carriers, no planet-killing weaponry. What exactly do you imagine you could accomplish? Cole smiled again, that predator smile. Delegate Kreshva, that is a very good question. Let me answer it with a story. Back on Earth, in a time before we had the Geneva Conventions, there was a nation called Carthage, very powerful, very wealthy, controlled a lot of territory around the Mediterranean Sea. They fought a series of wars against Rome, another powerful nation. 3 wars total. Carthage won some battles. Rome won some battles. Back and forth, very traditional warfare. Then came the Third Punic War. He paused, letting the unfamiliar names sink in. Rome decided they were done with traditional warfare. They were done with rules and honor and proportional response. They besieged Carthage for 3 years. Starved them. When the city finally fell, the Romans killed or enslaved every single person. Then they burned the city to the ground. Then, and this is the important part, they salted the earth so nothing would ever grow there again. They did not just defeat Carthage. They erased it, made it a lesson, a warning. Today you can visit the ruins, but Carthage as a civilization, as a people, as a culture, gone, extinct, deleted from history except as a cautionary tale about what happens when you push Rome too far. Thex'nor felt his defensive plates beginning to secrete stress hormones. Other delegates were showing similar signs of discomfort. Vorthak's scales had lost their aggressive coloration, fading to a neutral gray. Now, you are correct, Cole continued. We have 12 faster-than-light ships. 3 are cargo vessels. But those cargo vessels, each one can carry 50,000 tons of material. And we have a lot of material back home. We have been building nuclear weapons since 1945. We stopped counting how many we had sometime in the 1980s because the number stopped mattering. We have enough to turn every inhabited planet in this sector into radioactive glass multiple times over. We just never built the delivery systems to get them here because we had no reason to. Yet, the younger human beside Ambassador Martinez, the one in the suit, cleared his throat nervously. Gunny, maybe we should dial it back a notch. Almost done, sir, Cole said without looking away from the delegates. See, the thing about humans is, we are really good at logistics. We built a highway system across an entire continent just to make sure we could move military equipment quickly. We created a network of computers specifically so our military could communicate after a nuclear war. We invented freeze-dried food, GPS navigation, and duct tape because our military needed them. If we decided we needed to project force out here to really project it, we would have the infrastructure running in 6 months. A year. Delegate Ternoth of the Hexian Concordance, whose species were known for their mathematical precision, spoke in rapid clicks that the translator rendered as careful, measured words. You describe capabilities, not intentions. What would prompt humanity to undertake such an escalation? What would trigger this theoretical transformation from observer species to active combatant? Good question, Cole acknowledged. I cannot speak for humanity as a whole, but I can tell you what would do it for me personally. What would make me advocate for the kind of war I am describing? It is pretty simple, actually. If I saw someone doing to civilians what was done to Kellis Station, and if I saw the people responsible arguing that it was justified, that it was legitimate military strategy, that the rules against such actions were primitive and weak, if I saw that, I would remember Earth history. I would remember that we made rules against that specific thing, because we knew how effective it was, how quickly it spirals into total war, how many people die when you decide civilians are acceptable targets. And I would think we cannot let this become normal. We cannot let this be how war is fought out here. He looked directly at Vorthak now. So to answer your question from earlier, about whether we expect you to believe that humans are warriors to be feared, the answer is no. We do not expect you to believe it. We do not even want you to believe it. We would much prefer you continue thinking of us as soft, primitive newcomers who do not understand how galactic power works. That would be ideal. Because as long as you think that, as long as you dismiss us as irrelevant, you will keep following your existing rules of engagement. You will keep your wars limited, contained, and manageable. You will avoid doing the things that would make us stop being observers and start being participants. Ambassador Martinez stood and placed a hand on Cole's shoulder. Thank you, Gunnery Sergeant. I think that is sufficient context for our position. Please return to your seat. Cole nodded and walked back to the observer section, his footsteps the only sound in the vast conference hall. Martinez addressed the assembled delegates, her tone professional and diplomatic, but with an undercurrent of steel that had not been there before. The human delegation wishes to make our position clear. We are not threatening intervention in the Caldarian-Vrynn conflict. We are not demanding changes to your established protocols. We are simply requesting that all parties involved consider the precedent being set. If targeting civilian agricultural infrastructure becomes accepted galactic military doctrine, if the protections afforded to non-combatants are eroded in the name of efficiency, then we will be forced to reevaluate our own strategic posture. Thex'nor found his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. Ambassador Martinez, what exactly does reevaluating your strategic posture mean? It means, Ambassador Thex'nor, that humanity has spent 80 years building a military designed to never again fight a total war against itself. We have weapons, tactics, and doctrines that exist solely to sit in storage and rust, because we swore we would never use them. We have contingency plans for scenarios we pray will never occur. We have capabilities we desperately hope we never need to demonstrate. But if the galactic community decides that the rules protecting civilians, prisoners, and non-military targets are optional, then we have to assume those same standards might one day be applied to human civilians, and we cannot allow that. We will not allow that. She let that sink in for a moment before continuing. So we are asking, very politely, that everyone in this room consider whether the tactical advantage of destroying Kellis Station was worth normalizing that type of warfare, because once that door opens, once we all agree that there are no protected categories of targets, humanity will walk through it. And on the other side of that door are 12,000 years of institutionalized violence, refined over countless conflicts, encoded into our military traditions, and waiting for the restrictions to be lifted. Vorthak's frills had flattened completely against his skull. When he spoke, his voice had lost its aggressive edge. The Vrynn Collective will take your concerns under advisement. That is all we ask, Martinez said. She gathered her materials, gestured to her two companions, and the three humans walked toward the exit. As they reached the door, Cole paused and looked back at the assembled delegates. Oh, one more thing. Those rules we made, the Geneva Conventions, and all the rest, we did not make them because we are morally superior or more evolved than you. We made them because we are terrified of ourselves. We know exactly what we are capable of when the gloves come off, and that is why we really hope you never make us prove it. The door closed behind the human delegation. For a long moment nobody moved. Then Delegate HFY spoke softly. Did that human just threaten the entire galactic community with extinction? No, Thex'nor said quietly. His three eyes focused on the door the humans had exited through. That human just explained why there are rules and what happens when species fight wars without them. The fact that we are all sitting here, unharmed and alive to have this conversation, that is the threat. They could have demonstrated their capabilities at any time. They chose words instead, which means they are still following their rules, still restraining themselves, still hoping we are wise enough to do the same. Vorthax stood abruptly. This is absurd. One minor species barely capable of interstellar travel, and we are supposed to restructure our military doctrine because they showed us pictures of their self-inflicted atrocities? I will not be intimidated by apes who learned to use fire recently enough that they can still remember the taste of ash. Then you are a fool, said Delegate Ternoth. Her mathematical mind had been calculating probabilities. A species that nearly destroyed itself multiple times and survived each instance is not weak. It is anti-fragile. It is dangerous precisely because it has experience with total war, and chose to continue existing anyway. The human was correct. Those rules they made were not created to protect others from them. They were created to protect them from themselves, which means they know exactly how effective unrestricted warfare is when they wage it. Thex'nor gathered his materials slowly, his mind replaying Cole's words. 40,000 civilians dead at Kellis Station had seemed like a regrettable but acceptable military cost just hours ago. Now, with the specter of human history looming over the discussion, it seemed like something else entirely. It seemed like a test, a line in the sand, a moment where the galactic community would decide what kind of wars it wanted to fight. As the delegates filed out of the conference hall, each lost in their own thoughts, Thex'nor made a decision. He would recommend to the Caldarian High Command that they open genuine negotiations with the Vrynn Collective, not because the humans had threatened them, but because the humans had warned them, and species that survived 12,000 years of perfecting murder against themselves, while somehow avoiding extinction, were exactly the kind of species you listened to when they offered warnings about warfare. In the corridor outside, Ambassador Martinez was speaking quietly to Gunnery Sergeant Cole. Thex'nor could not hear the words, but he could see the body language. She was not angry. She was satisfied. This had been planned. The humans had sent a Marine to a diplomatic conference specifically to deliver that message. They had wanted the galactic community to understand what humanity was capable of, what they were choosing not to do, and what might change that choice. Thex'nor felt a chill run through his circulatory system. The humans had been sitting quietly in observer status for decades, watching and learning, saying nothing while the established powers conducted their affairs. Everyone had assumed they were simply too weak, too new, too primitive to matter. But what if they had been doing something else entirely? What if they had been waiting, evaluating, deciding whether the galactic community was civilized enough to be worth joining, or dangerous enough to require correction? He thought about Cole's final statement. The fact that they were all alive and unharmed was the threat. The restraint was the warning. The rules were the only thing standing between galactic civilization and a species that had spent 12 millennia learning how to kill efficiently and had apparently gotten very, very good at it. Thex'nor made a second decision. He would recommend not just negotiations but a comprehensive review of the Caldarian military's rules of engagement. Because if the choice was between accepting some limitations on warfare or discovering firsthand whether human warnings matched human capabilities, he would choose limitations every single time. The humans disappeared around a corner, heading back to their small embassy ship. Somewhere behind them, they left a conference hall full of beings who had just learned that the quiet newcomers in the corner were not harmless. They were restrained. There was a universe of difference between the